Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I am your host, Dr. Harbir Sayan. Thank you, as always, guys, for taking the time to join me here to learn and to grow. I know there's a million things you could be doing, but you've taken the time to listen and to watch, and I am truly, truly grateful. Always, of course, after I tell you how grateful I am, I have a big request, which is please do share it. I am really excited about this episode. I think there's going to be some really, really valuable insight and maybe a little bit of controversy in there as well, just for fun. So I know you're going to enjoy this one. And I would love for you to share this with all of our friends and colleagues out there in the industry, because I think this is something that's going to help all of us to be better. So please take a screenshot, throw it up on Instagram, put a link on LinkedIn, send a text to a friend, whatever you do to share the podcast, please do that. And before we jump in and before I introduce my guest, I do want to say a big thank you to our partner, which is Figs Scrubs. You know, I'm posting about Figs often and talking about it on the podcast often. I am right now wearing my off-shift black quarter zip Figs sweatshirt, super comfy, you know, a little semi-profesh, not too bad, but definitely something I love wearing when I'm not in the clinic. So please do check out Figs, and you can use my code Harbir S First Figs, Harbir S First Figs at checkout. So thank you to Figs. Now, our guest is Mr. Joe Croft, who is the founder and CEO of Gunnar Optiks. I know you've heard of Gunnar Optiks. They've been around for a long time, and they've definitely made a splash in the optical industry. We're going to learn a lot about Gunnar, the inception, the evolution, and of course, our amazing guest, Joe, who is a Stanford University graduate and with an engineering degree. He actually, which did focus on optics and emphasis on product design. He spent a decade at Oakley in the new product categories, and really fanatical about design and launching new products and branding, which of course will come through when we talk about Gunnar. And ultimately, he's an entrepreneur at heart, spending over 20 years in entrepreneurship, having started multiple companies. So I think he's going to bring a lot of insight to the podcast. So thank you, Joe, for taking the time to join me.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Number one, you said we've been around a long time. Yeah, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year, which is crazy.
I didn't know
As
that.
I walk around some of the shows and interact with some of the ODs out there, I'm like, you guys look younger than our company. So it's great to see this upcoming generation of optometrists, especially. But it's good. Thanks for the intro, and it's great to be here, especially with I don't know if you have a lot of Canadian friends as well as elsewhere, but we love our Canadian friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, given we are primarily a Canadian-based podcast, or we have lots of Canadian listeners and friends who will be tuning in, but we do definitely have a lot of reach in the States as well. So it'll be a nice kind of broad conversation across North America. Actually, we have lots of listeners from outside of North America. So hopefully there's people in Australia, UK, wherever, who have heard of Gunnar as well, maybe take something away from this. So Joe, I'll give you a couple of minutes. Give me your slightly longer than elevator pitch of who you are and what you do.
Well, good. Well, I'll start with who I am, because that drives a little bit about what I do. I'm a slightly schizophrenic left brain, right brain combo that ended up at Stanford University back when they let dumb people in there. And I was trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, because Stanford has this beautiful divide in the campus, North Campus and South Campus. If you haven't been there, it started from the original quad when they built it, and they put the math and science on the north corner of the quad, and then they put the literature and English and history on the south side of campus. And the campus has grown into this perfect divide of, they call them techies and fuzzies there. And you kind of have to declare your camp. It's like being sorted into the houses of Gryffindor. You can't be one, or you can't be both. You have to be one or the other. And I kept on flip-flopping back and forth, and finally found this great combo, which is called product design, for the right brain creative part, which I love. I'm a designer at heart and love to still sketch and draw and create things. But then the left brain is, I'm a scientist. I love numbers. I grew up in a house with a dad who has a PhD in statistics and was a professor. And so product design was this perfect merge of engineering and art. And I've just always been in my career focused on doing both of those things. Let's find great problems out there, solve those problems with creative solutions, and then put the candy coating, the beautiful shell on the outside to make products that aren't just functional, because engineers make great functional products. They tend to look bad. Artists make beautiful sculptural things that you want to touch and or interact with, but a lot of times if it's pure art, you can't do a single darn thing with it. So when you blend those two together, it's fantastic. And so that's what I've done with my career. I've been in premium branded consumer products my whole career. First in the outdoor industry, making, I know it doesn't relate to optics at all, but I made high alpine backpacks. So, put backpacks on top of the Himalayas, Mount Everest, and the 1996 IMAX expedition. Got to those are my packs that took the IMAX camera on top of the Mount Everest, and then got recruited from there to work at Oakley, and that was really defining for me. So working at Oakley under the tutelage of some really the finest minds in kind of this optics category, not only on innovation, but it was that for me, it was that perfect combination of innovation, engineering, and then the art over there, because every last detail, I mean, we wouldn't send an invoice out without having the design department look at how that invoice was designed. So it was crazy. And I learned a fanaticism there for design and for brand. And then once I left Oakley, I started a bunch of businesses, including Gunnar, with that same mentality. Let's go solve great problems with innovative technological solutions. And then let's make sure that it's got over the top of it that brand and that beauty that needs to, speak to the heart, not just the mind. So that's what we do at Gunnar here. We want to talk to people's hearts and minds both.
That's such an awesome backstory. I really appreciate you sharing that. There's so much in there, actually, because before we went online, I said I really love to hear the entrepreneurial journey. I love to hear what's behind the scenes, what makes a person tick. And you shared a lot of things that I would love to dive into. But we have other things that we need to talk about. So I'm going to see if maybe I could pick a couple of cool highlights in there. But I think we'll just say that's a great backstory, and I will have to come back and revisit some of that stuff. The backpack.
I'm sure there'll be more that comes up. Yeah.
Yeah. I love all of that. That's very, very cool. And of course, your experience within Oakley, I think, is very formative for then what you did with Gunnar. So let's talk about let's talk about Gunnar. Let's talk about the initial sort of inception of it. So you were at Oakley. Did you start Gunnar? Like the thoughts of that, was that while you were at Oakley? Was it after and you came up with something completely separate?
I just left Oakley. So this is in 2003, which again, ancient history, more than 20 years ago. And had left Oakley to start in on a couple entrepreneurial ventures. And one of my friends, a real good friend I've known for a long time, came to me and said, "You got to help me out, Joe. I'm having migraines every single day." And he was a Wall Street guy, right? Looking at 6 of the old CRT screens, and went to his doctor, which we are always pushing people with any type of eye strain problems. Go see your doctor. Your optometrist can diagnose way better than ChatGPT can, WebMD can, than your friend who's on the street who has some homeopathic remedy. Go see your doctor. So first and foremost, we're your biggest fans, and we're pushing people your way.
That's good. You just endeared yourself to a good to our audience. That's good.
Yeah, we'll actually talk about how Gunnars do help diagnose some undiagnosed people out there. So that's a good comment. So in any case, my friend Matt said, migraines, my doc, which, hey, again, think this is 20 plus years ago, said the only thing to do is take more breaks and don't look at the screen so much. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine this guy isn't just a type A, he's a type AAA, like AAA, like just wired and watching the market, trying to time everything. He's like, I can't do that. I have to be on for market bell open or market bell close. It's like, you got to fix this. There's got to be some sort of solution. So we started doing what we needed to do, which was dig with experts into the research that had been already done. And back then, surprisingly enough, there was a lot of research done already on computer vision syndrome.
Okay.
A lot of good doctors out there that had been involved, and probably you guys will be interested to know who had done most of the funding of the research. It's this little tiny company called Microsoft. Right? Okay. Personally think Microsoft was doing a little bit of CYA. They wanted to make sure that they were covered in case of any litigation, because it was a big problem. And it was back then, and it's gotten bigger still, that people are having major issues looking at computer screens all day.
No doubt.
So
that's very interesting. So, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, we tapped into a great research institute that was up at the Pacific University. Okay, there aren't that many College of Optometries in the U.S. Back then, there were only 17. I think they're 19 or 20 now.
No, but there's 20. There's like 25 or 6 now. There's a bunch that opened the last few years. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, Dr. Jim Sheedy, who's retired now, but he had performed a lot of those studies, and we're like, hey, let's glean everything we can from not just Jim, but we had several other people that we gathered together into this consortium of medical advisors for us. And we did take our prototypes, original prototypes. We figured out what the problems were first. And Jim was super eloquent about, hey, here's what the major problems are. Start with blink rate, right? Your blink rate on a computer goes from your normal blink rate down to about a third of what it normally is, especially through intense visual tasks. Something that requires a faster saccade rate, it's more disruptive to have a blink, and hence your body does what it normally does. I'm going to adapt to the environment, and I'm just not going to blink so much. So blink rate, big problem. Muscular eye strain, everyone knows about the accommodation reflex in the eyes. What he had found out, though, using this is really interesting. This is a wide range phoropter, and studying what's happening to people's eyes as they're looking at a screen, as those eye muscles in the accommodation reflex gets tired. There's a drift in focus actually behind the screen. And this lag of accommodation was something well documented through his studies. And he said, there's probably something to be done there. So muscular eye strain, dry eye, number one, because your blink rate. Muscular eye strain because of your just repetitive stress in them. Any now, you guys know about the 20/20 rule. Anything that is flexed all day long is going to have issues.
Yeah.
Third thing was the quality of light. And that's where we're going to have some fun discussions, right? It's not about blue light necessarily. It's about the quality of the light that comes off a computer screen. And
there's definitely a lot of opinions on blue light. We're going to dive into that. So if you're waiting to hear about that, don't worry, we'll get there.
That's right.
And so that's really cool. Cool to hear. A lot of times it starts with a pain point. When somebody innovates something, it starts with either their own pain point, the episode prior to this, or maybe 1 or 2 episodes prior to when this one goes live, is with another innovator, inventor, you could say, in the eye care space, who basically kind of said a similar thing. I was going through an eye exam, and this was really cumbersome and really annoying, and I figured there had to be a better way. And that's often the kind of the inception story. But I love that you already have that science brain. You studied at Stanford of all places, and then you went and dug into the research. You didn't just say, I'm going to create this colored lens, right? Because I think, unfortunately, I think there is a bit of that perception about, at least in the early days of Gunnar, it's like, well, somebody just decided to, because they're, especially this day and age, because anybody could buy a yellow tinted lens off of Amazon. And
Absolutely.
It's like, well, what's the difference, right? And so it's nice to know, at least in the beginning, we're going to go into what the difference is, but at least in the beginning, it started from science.
100%, yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I mentioned Dr. Jim Sheedy. We actually pulled in probably 5 or 6 other doctors, not just ODs, but also we got some MDs from ophthalmology as well too. And having those minds together was super invaluable. So we number one, start with the medical approach, start with the science approach. And as we innovate, then it comes down to testing. And this is something that's not, on one hand, it wasn't a great thing for us internally, especially in a very, meagerly funded startup. But at the same time, I'm proud of it now. We actually went through and produced our first 10,000 units. And as we were kind of parallel testing at the same time, we found out that those units weren't what we needed. We actually took them off the market and we retooled them with a slightly different lens configuration because they weren't testing out as well as the secondary, the Gen 2 product. So again, testing is important as well too. And we'll put it out there that we've done tests in the past, continue to test in the future, and that's important. Data rules everything. And that's where, in the pre-show, we said we might have some interesting debates, may have differences of opinion. And I said, as long as science is involved, we're not going to have differences of opinion, because we want to go for a science-based, research-based solution. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the lenses, because at least that initial when Gunnar came to market, and I watched you. I saw your clip on Shark Tank. I want to refer. I'll get back to that in a moment. But in that clip, you talked about the proprietary technology, the IP, the patents that you have. So can you tell us a little bit about what is unique about a Gunnar lens that helps with these various conditions?
You bet. And if you start with the problems, dry eye from blink rate, muscular eye strain, the quality of light, and then we didn't talk about glare and visual noise, but those are the main problems we solved. So let's start with the first one. Dry eye is a major issue. In fact, I mentioned studies. We didn't need to do FDA clinical trials because of the reader exemption that we fall under, but we did them anyway. We got a local, fantastic guy, local OD here, which was Dr. Joyce. He had done the clinical trials for Synergize. If you guys are familiar with the hybrid contact lens, he was very familiar with the process. He actually got us through a very similar process where we tested out in 3 independent doctor locations, over 100 test subjects, a 6-week trial, and again, fantastic results. But the number one symptom that was relieved was this dry eye. Mm-hmm. So how do you attack dry eye? And it might seem simple to you, but at the same time, the industry hasn't talked about this enough. How did Oakley protect people's eyes as they're in environments where you've got tons of wind currents, i.e. on a bicycle when you're skiing or whatnot? High base curve, wrap close, sit close to the face. You would not think that makes a giant difference in an office environment. I'm sitting in an office environment right now. I don't have wind blowing at me in my face. Mm-hmm. At the same time, there are more air currents than you would think. And number 2, you can change the relative humidity inside the ocular pocket. And that's something that we've done over and over again, is tested with hygrometers, where you put a sensor on the inside of the lens, sensor on the outside of the lens, to test the difference between the relative humidity with closely fit glasses. And can tell you that, we've got statistical averages. It depends on which, demographic you're after, but some as high as 60% increase in relative humidity in the ocular pocket. And it's over and over again, people say, oh yeah, I had dry eye issues, watering, tear, whatever it is. I put on Gunnars and I feel a huge difference. And largely it's because you're keeping that tear film from breaking up. And that's again, important thing to understand. As you wrap and sit close to your face, you're protecting the eye from drying out. And is that patentable? It actually is. Oakley patented that for sunglasses. In Oakley terms, it was called XYZ Optics. For us, we just call it what it is, which is a taper-corrected offset optical center geometry. But that is
easy to say.
Something that's really important that we're doing. Because everyone else that you find out there, if you're just getting over the counter, is doing 4 base very flat. And if you prescribe, it's tough to find 6 and 8 base frames to actually prescribe. So that's something.
I'm really glad you started with the dry eye. So, because I do, you could say we kind of specialize in dry eye in our clinics. So we do see a lot of dry eye patients. And you see that the various reasons for dry eye, whether it's just an evaporative condition or there's some underlying condition, autoimmune, whatever it might be, there's all sorts of reasons for dry eye. And we have all sorts of different eye drops and spend all this money on all these devices and technology. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to need to understand better how a pair of glasses is helping with dry eye, because we have some, I'll just share my thoughts on this a little bit. We have some ideas that, if we can, like you talked about blink rate, if we can improve blink rate by relaxing the accommodative system, we know there's some secondary effects that can come from that, and that can help with dry eye. But I really didn't think about the fact that your glasses are sitting closer to the ocular surface, or to the face, and therefore retaining more moisture within that, almost like these moisture goggles that sometimes patients will purchase for dry eyes. So that's very interesting. So that very cool point, and good, again, to your credit, you measured it, and you can measure the difference in humidity inside the glasses and outside the glasses.
Yeah, when we're talking to someone just off the street, the best thing we ask them is, have you ever been in a cold environment and then walked into a warm and humid environment and watched your glasses, they fog up? And all you have to do is move them down probably 2 or 3 millimeters, and all of a sudden that fog dissipates. That's how sensitive that little ocular pocket is. So you need to get a really good fit. So again, if there's anyone out there that's prescribing, if you've got your opticians in the front that are helping dispense that, look for the best fit, especially along the brow line, because all that humid, warm air rises, and you want to trap as much of that in as possible.
Very interesting. So, can you tell me again what the technology is called? What makes it proprietary?
So in an over-the-counter situation, we have to taper correct the lens. And I'd pop these lenses out, but I can't real quick on camera here. But as you wrap a lens, you guys are all smart about refractive errors that come in. You induce prism. So the correction for prismatic issues is, we call it a taper corrected lens. We're thinning out the lens as you get towards the lateral side. Medial is obviously a thicker lens. And what happens is you're looking through offset optical centers for the base and ocular curve. You're actually getting a perfect ray trace through the lens, as opposed to if you were to take a normal lens, keep a constant thickness lens, wrap it, you would all of a sudden have base in or base out. You'd induce prism there, and we want to make sure that we're keeping people, if anything, we want to do slight little bit of base in, just because that's a convergence reaction, and want to make sure that people are seeing the screen without having to fight against the lens. Yeah,
that's very cool. I love hearing that, again, how well thought through that is, and how, again, you're relying on the science to provide better optics while also providing that wrap and relief from dry eye in this sort of a interesting way. So let's talk about some other aspects of the lens that make it. What other patents or IP do you have specific to the lens regarding optics or anything else?
Good. We talked about the lag of accommodation, and this one, it's something that ODs can replicate very easily. In fact, you'd probably do it all the time, any day of the week. Knowing that computer distance is important. You can prescribe for that distance. But that lag of accommodation in Jim Sheedy's trials, he almost found that it was this 3-hour mark is when the eyes just got to the point where they couldn't stick the focus right on the screen anymore. And the amount of lag was about a half diopter. So, and then you get this little wave going back and forth of people drifting focus, and then snapping back, drifting focus, snap back over that half diopter correction for tired eyes. So what's the solution? Let's just give the eyes that extra boost they need. In our first 10,000 units we put out there had half diopter positive correction in there. And what we found was it was too much. So quarter diopter ended up being the right for people to multitask in an environment or whatnot without giving them, a lot of the people that we're giving glasses to the first time they've ever worn any type of corrective lenses, and especially in multitasking, it throws them for a loop. So that's that quarter diopter, low power, and then in the curved format, that's all covered by the patents. So that's the muscular.
Do all Gunnar lenses have that plus quarter?
So if you go in our website, anything over the counter that says Gunnar Focus, yes, does have just that slight add. And everyone, again, does it make that big of a difference? Ask someone who works on a computer 12 to 14 hours a day. Little tiny incremental changes make a difference.
No, I can attest from my personal experience and my clinical experience that a quarter actually makes a really big difference. And you learned it from experience. I also learned it from experience, because this type of stuff's not always taught in textbooks, even for us. A half is probably too much for a lot of people, depending on their age. If they're a little bit presbyopic, and perhaps half might be a little better for them. But for somebody in their 20s, a quarter is more than enough. And it can have a really, I've prescribed that really low plus a lot. And patients come back very happy with it. There's other forms, as I'm sure other forms or designs of lenses, like anti-fatigue lenses. I imagine we're going to probably get into that a little bit too, but that simple single vision plus a quarter can go a really long way. So cool. So that's part of your lens patent, is to have that in the Gunnar Focus, to have that plus a quarter.
Correct. Over the counter, that's, if we look at competitors, and there really aren't a lot of competitors out there, but they just don't do it because, again, we've been pretty aggressive about patenting and then protecting those patents. So that's important. And by the way, I mentioned to you that we're helping the optometric community because we are inadvertently diagnosing a lot of undiagnosed myopes.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you give a plus quarter to someone who is an undiagnosed myope, guess what happens? Instant negative reaction. And anytime we get a negative review or someone saying, your glasses were supposed to help me and I get headaches now, boom, go to the doctor, and 99 times out of 100, yep, they need something to minus, sometimes high minus, and then they come back and like, hey, I can see. I've never known that I was nearsighted.
That's funny. I didn't think about that. Yes, but that, of course, that happens. You get this all the time. People who buy readers over the counter, I was like, that's not for you. So I guess it makes sense. Any kind of plus, they're not going to like that. I want to go back to the Shark Tank thing, because as we're talking about IPs and all this kind of stuff, and then we'll dive a little deeper into it. I want to talk about your relationship with optometrists as well. I watched the video and I appreciated it, and I felt myself being endeared to you as the CEO, as the person who's making the pitch, because it must be difficult. I've had actually, I'm going to use this as a segue in a moment to a different topic, but I've had another guest on the podcast a couple of times now from the UK. I don't know if you've heard of oh my gosh,
Dragon's Den.
Yeah, he was on Dragon's Den in the UK. Oh man, he's a good guy too. Now I forgot his name. But anyways, he's got his brand in the UK that's specifically blue light blocking. We're going to get to blue light in a moment. But I've watched his video, and I've seen, of course, my parents love Dragon's Den and Shark Tank. They watch that stuff all the time. And I watch, it's tough. It must be difficult to get up there in front of these like 5 or 6 very successful business people. And at the end of the day, it's a TV show, and who knows how long you've been standing there. But there was a point where, you made your pitch, and there was a point where they were just sort of like, I wrote a note in my phone here. What did I say? Yapping at you is what I wrote down. And I'm like, these guys are just yapping at him, but you kept your cool. And now I understand you're a numbers guy. You really just stuck to the numbers, and you stuck to your guns, and you were kind of like, well, how about this? How about this? I feel like 99 people out of 100 would have said, whatever you said, okay, I'll go with it. But I really appreciated that. I wanted to make sure I gave you the credit for that, because I imagine that must have been very difficult.
Good. Well, thanks for that. The Shark Tank experience was fantastic. I will give them huge props for, again, it really, for entrepreneurs, it gives, even like my kids, after watching it for a decade, they know things about valuation. They know how to, different types of instruments, debt versus equity. They know, what a royalty is. They know what a good deal, they can sniff it out. So yeah. I encourage everyone, not only, watch it with yourself, bring your kids into it. The more you get educated about science, the finances and how businesses run, the better. So it's great.
Absolutely. So yeah, for those who haven't watched it, I encourage you to go watch it, because I think it's actually a great clip. So you did have an offer. Lori gave you an offer for she'd loan you the money instead of just this straight up investment and take a certain percentage of the company. Did that pan out? Because I know a lot of times behind the scenes it doesn't end up working out.
So again, I don't know at this point, probably no secrets out there, but only 40% of the deals that close, kind of handshake deals on TV, actually close behind the scenes. So we were part of the 60 that dropped out. But
yeah, I've heard it's quite a high number. Yeah.
Yeah, but she's fantastic, and just texted her probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's one of those things where they're busy, they're awesome people, but they're concerned about those companies as well.
Yeah, good to know. Good to know. Nice to know you get to stay in touch. I think it was the same case with why am I forgetting his name? Oh man, he's gonna be mad at me if he watches. But it was the same case with them on the Dragon's Den, right? The deal didn't end up going through, but we know that's the case for a lot. And again, it's a TV show. At the end of the day, we have to remember that too. But anyways, I wanted to get back. I wanted to mention that now. On the topic of the segue I wanted to make was on the topic of blue light. So let's dive into blue light a little bit, and or a lot, and then we're gonna talk about the optometric community and where they kind of fall on your radar. Okay. When I say blue light, what do you feel?
I hate the term blue light glasses. It is such a disservice to the consumer, to the optometric community, to science in general, and to this little segment of the industry, which we pioneered. Remember, 20 years ago, nothing existed for computer eye strain and relieving computer eye strain in terms of the whole eyewear industry. So we pioneered this, and we struggled with what to call it. We digital performance eyewear, premium computer eyewear, gaming eyewear. We've tried a bunch of different things. The fact that the industry settled in on blue light glasses irks me to no end, because blue light, especially when people are like, oh yeah, blue light's bad, I got to get rid of all blue light in my life. And the reality is science doesn't say that. So we want to be true to what science says. So blue light has its function in your life, but then there's certain things where all of a sudden it's become the boogeyman and everyone wants to get blue light out, but they don't know why. No one knows why.
Yeah. I mean, we have patients come in all the time like, oh, I bought these blue light glasses, but I don't know if they're helping. Well, they're probably not. But in that Shark Tank clip, you did, as part of your pitch, talk about it blocks this percentage of blue light. So it certainly was an important aspect. And we do understand that blue light, or the blue spectrum, or high energy spectrum, a part of the spectrum, has some effect on the ocular surface or the optics or whatever it might be, visual fatigue. So is there some value in blocking that spectrum of light at all? And I mean, to observably, you're wearing a pair of Gunnars right now. They're yellow tint. Imagine they are blocking, just because they're yellow, they're blocking a bunch of blue light as well.
Good. And everyone comes back to, if you ask any consumer off the street, and even a bunch of ODs out there, why do you want to block blue light? A lot of them come up blank. Oh, because it's bad. Mm-hmm. Guess what, guys? We need blue light in our lives, right? In fact, that's where we're going to tie a lot of things together here, right? Myopia and the correlation between myopes and, we were working with National Institute of Health, Susan Vitale, who was, published a bunch of statistics between the correlation of the rise of the PC and then the rise of myopia in the North American population. And we tried to get her to commit and say, oh, are those correlated? And if you go into what actually prevents myopia in kids or populations, it's going outside, which is kind of crazy. You need that blue light and the exposure to full spectrum light to help develop, especially in kids. So blue light can be great. Wake up in the morning, what do you need to do? Get out and immerse yourself in full spectrum daylight. That's awesome. That's going to wake you up. So where does blue light come in to inhibit you? Number one, there is a good correlation between the melatonin suppression reaction and 450 nanometer blue light exposure, right? So that's pretty well documented. The science says if you want to be alert in the evenings, then block some, if you don't want to be alert in the evenings, block blue light. If you want to mess up your circadian rhythms, then keep bombarding yourself with artificial high energy blue light, and you're going to mess up your circadian rhythms. So that's pretty well documented. And that's where when we actually had a lawsuit, I suppose I can talk about it, but people said, hey, you use in your marketing the term harmful blue light, and they wanted to say all blue light is bad. So, if you're letting any blue light through, that means that you're letting harmful blue light through. And there was a long lawsuit. But the bottom line is, no, we want people to be educated that the only way that it harms you is if you are letting it disrupt your sleep patterns. And also, I do want to put a head nod out there to the people that have done the studies about getting kids exposed to full spectrum light, because that's important. Get kids outside. That's that's going to keep them from getting myopic. So a couple other things that do happen though about blue light and why we like to filter blue light, that comes to contrast perception. We've got some contrast grids that are, they're, in fact, I don't know if we have them on our website anymore, but we ought to put them back up again. And we have people test with and without contrast perception. They look a little bit like, everyone's familiar with the colorblind plates that you test your patients with. So we're basically looking for, can people see the difference between shades of gray and the contrast perception? And with gunners on versus gunners off, the contrast perception jumps through the roof. In fact, we had a great study, back to science, which was done by 4 different radiology departments. And that is where life and death comes into play with contrast perception. And in a very good, repeatable event, they took chest x-rays of cancer patients and had multiple people read those, radiologists read those with and without gunners on. And 5% more cancer nodules found when wearing gunners than without. Now, you might not think 5% is that much more, but again, we talk about incremental differences over time make a huge difference. And I got to tell you, if I'm the patient that has a doctor reading my chest x-rays, I want those extra 5% found. So that's where blocking blue light comes a lot down to, and we can talk about you guys know more than anybody about the physiology of the retina and about the distribution of rods and cones, and also the deposits of lutein that form on that macula. That's a natural blue light filter. We're enhancing that natural blue light filter to let your fovea do the work, right? You have almost no blue light receptors in that foveal pit. So let's give your eye the type of light it likes to see, innervate those ganglion cells that are trying to get the light back into your the part of your brain that wants to process. So let's filter out the stuff that you don't necessarily want to see. And that's one of the reasons why we feel like blue light filtration isn't about, blue light bad. It's about contrast enhancement. And then the second part of it is in the evening, if you've got circadian rhythm issues, that's where we want to help you out.
I got it. The contrast aspect is interesting. Whoops. Because I certainly have seen some, I guess you could say some literature on that, and have had some discussions on that. I wonder, so on the contrasting, we're blocking the blue light that's helping the contrast. Are gunners only for near tasks like screen time, or are people wearing? Is there a product that's designed for longer distance, like driving and things like that too?
So yeah, thanks for asking. And that's something internally that we talk a lot about. Task-specific eyewear is something that your listeners should love. And as an industry as a whole, we work with the Vision Council. We want to educate everybody that you can't run a marathon in your loafers, right? You don't go golfing in hiking boots. You don't go to the beach in high-heeled shoes, right? Shoe industry has done a fantastic job of educating people about task-specific footwear. Everyone's got how many? 20 pair of shoes, 30 pair of shoes? I mean, I don't know. I personally probably have close to 20 pair. How many pair of eyewear does your average patient have? 1, 2, maybe. So we're trying to educate people on task specific. And we do have in the Gunnar lineup, we've got the Gunnar Focus, again, for over the counter. We do prescription, and that's, again, for your ODs. Get signed up with our program. We fulfill through one of the top quality best labs here in the US. And we do prescription, but we love it when the doc is prescribing a computer prescription. In our own line, we do have Gunnar Focus that has that extra, quarter diopter add in neutral focus, which is 0. It's a plano. Very few of our styles come in plano. And that's largely because, we want to be true to what the company is about, which is working on digital screens. There aren't that many people that are looking at digital screens across the room. Maybe some people are looking at their big screen TV, but at that point, the majority of light that you're getting is coming from ambient light as opposed to just from the screen.
Yeah. Okay. So the primary focus, pardon the pun, is screens and people who are on screens, and we didn't get into it, and we probably won't, but like gaming industry is a huge part of what you guys do. But people who just are at work and on screens all day long, that's the main thing. There really isn't a lot of focus on a truck driver who wants to have better contrast at nighttime. That's not a big part of what you guys do. Is that correct?
Not so much. And again, if we were to go into night driving, we would take that same scientific approach and let's start with what is the ambient light? What are we trying to solve for? And I would hate to recommend gunners for night driving just from the sole fact that we haven't tested it.
Okay, I appreciate that. That's good to know, because because there's this happens when there's knockoffs or copycats out there. Somebody will say Gunner's just yellow tint. Cool, I'm going to come out with a yellow tint. Now I sell it on Amazon. Somebody's going to be like, I wear Gunner type lenses for driving at night. So it muddies the waters, and it's kind of hard to know. So it's nice to make that distinction for somebody who's looking at the actual Gunner brand. That is not what they're designed for. And that way an OD or other ECP can kind of be more clear with their education to a patient about, which brand is better for what type of activity. And absolutely. Now, I do want to get into where optometry or opticians and optometrists fit in the landscape for Gunner. I think what you just said is really, really important for all of us, anybody who dispenses eyewear, who prescribes for eyewear, to understand and to prescribe for task-specific eyewear. And that's certainly something that I like to do, and I know many of my colleagues do as well. But let's go back. If you could give me a comparison. I know I'm taking up a lot of your time here. So if you could give me a comparison of what was Gunner's relationship with optometrists 15, 20 years ago, early days of Gunner, and what is it now? Is there a difference?
I don't think that we've changed our attitude or our support of the community whatsoever. We, in fact, our first almost 1,000 accounts were all ODs and MDs that were dispensing eyewear. So we've from the get-go always supported this community. I hate to say, I do feel a little bit of the community pulling away from us because of some financial trends, maybe of consolidation of ODs under some larger, financial entities out there.
It's a big topic in our industry. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's kind of sad when people come in and say, well, I hate to say so, but if you're not part of, you name it, pull whatever buying group it is or whatever, the private equity has been rolling up tons of people. They're like, yeah, we've kind of been given the mandate that we need to only buy from, a certain selection of, vendors. So from that standpoint, we 100% support the OD community, and we want to be here. I know that it happens, and I've seen consolidation in a lot of different industries I've been involved in. So it happens, but we're here for you. So that's what it is. And by the way, we've got anyone that comes to us and says, hey, I'd love to get involved with Gunner. What do we need to get going? One of the first things we hand them is, here's what it looks like in a typical practice, and show all the different points where, as you touch your customer from pre-customer screening, as you're handing literature to sign up a new customer, we encourage you to put at least a few questions in there about how much time do you spend on a computer. And then as you get into pre-exam, in the lane, make sure that prevalent thought of, hey, what do you spend your time on? And it's amazing as you have them, put down amount of screen time per day. People are putting down 6, 8, 10, 12 hours, and then it becomes so easy as they sit in the chair. Hey, we're going to talk about your everyday eyewear, but also in a talk, I see that you put down anything over 3 hours, and that's almost everybody.
Yeah.
You put your 8 hours of screen time, we need you. So that's, and then if it's properly implemented in the practice, a typical practice can put up to 80 to 100K at the bottom line just by getting a 15% attach rate. So it can be very profitable.
No doubt. Yeah, that's going to pique some interest for sure. Thanks for kind of leading into that, Joe. That was going to be one of my last questions was, so now ODs, ECPs in general, who are interested in partnering with Gunnar, how do we approach that? And what does that look like, if you don't mind? Are there Gunnar frames on the board, or are we putting Gunnar lenses into any frame? What does that generally look like?
Typically, again, remember we talked about high base curve. We only do high base curve. We really are selling you a frame lens combo. So put Gunnar frames up. We can fulfill. We stock them in our lab, and we can ship them to you, in a completed format. Fulfillment time depends throughout the year. We have some seasonal fluctuations, but anywhere between 6 and 14 days for lab fulfillment, and we can get them cross border for you, no problem. So it's pretty easy. We do distribute as far as the frames. The frames themselves, we have a distributor in Canada, and so that part's very easy. But again, most people, what they're doing is getting in frames on the board, and then once they're, and I don't want to say that over the counter isn't a big deal, because it is. It's amazing how many people come into a practice. You ask about, hey, for you personally, have you thought about, glasses for screens? And they're like, my kid's spending 14 hours a day playing Call of Duty. Do you have anything for him? He doesn't wear glasses currently, but I want to protect his eyes. And that's where the over-the-counter portion comes in as well, too. And again, easy to get through a Canadian distributor.
Got it. And when you say over-the-counter, that'd be something we'd have in the office, in the dispensary, just ready to go, pre-made, versus in the other case, we're putting the patient's prescription, we're sending the prescription to the lab, and they're fulfilling that.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. And where do we find out more information or get in contact?
Good. The website is gunnar.com. The email is sales@gunnar.com, and both are easy to get to you. If any of you, I am wide open, like joe@gunnars.com. That'll get to me as well, too. So we do have a good, robust sales organization. I'll pass it on. But I personally, as you can see, I'm passionate about this. And so if you've got people that want to get a hold of me personally and, either bend my ear, have you thought about this? If they've got good ideas to add to, because we're a mission-based company, right? We're not here about stealing dollars out of people's pockets. We're here to actually help people in this massive epidemic. I mean, when I told you before, 65% increase in myopia over the last 50 years, that's crazy. We want to save some people's eyesight. That's epidemic proportions if you really get down to it. And that's what we're after. Let's get in front of it. Let's solve some of these problems with not just myopia, but I've got my mom has really bad case of AMD, and she spent tons of time on the computer. So we want to make sure that the future of people's eyes looks bright. That's what we do.
I love that. Yeah, the mission-based aspect is very important. I think there often is some skepticism, some cynicism about just another brand, another company trying to make a buck. And of course, any entrepreneur at the end of the day, that's you need to make money to make your business thrive. But if it starts with an actual mission and a vision to help people, that always helps a lot. Can I just clarify, Gunnar, Gunnar, and is it gunnar.com or gunnars.com?
Both. They both work.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Same with the emails. Long story short, for any entrepreneur that's short on cash, when you first start the company, you take what you can get. And we got Gunnars early. And then after being in business about 6 or 8 years, we finally could purchase gunnar.com.
Good to know. That's a nice little entrepreneurial story as well. Awesome. Joe, anything that you wanted to mention that we didn't talk about?
Just that it is, again, I know the skepticism that can be out there. Any doctor is like, hey, I can fix this myself. I'm going to prescribe, something that's already sitting on my wall, and I know best. And we agree, docs know best. But the formula that we've come up with, high wrap, is important. The tint that we do is specific, and it's if you guys know anything about going to a lab, they're taking a blank, dipping it in a vat of yellow dye. I I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how precise is that? It's not whatsoever. We, on the other hand, have engineered the tint in, and we know exactly what comes off of a screen, where a red pixel, a blue pixel, and a green pixel phosphoresce, and where the peaks of energy are. We can tailor that specifically to it. We're engineers. We do this all day and all night. Your lab that's just dipping a blank into yellow dye, that dye is not doing you any services. So come to us. We're going to help you with your patients, and it's a win-win-win. You guys win because you're making more money and you're helping your patients. Your patient win, and then ultimately, you're right. We're not a nonprofit, but you're helping us win because we're saving people's eyes.
Sure. Great. Win-win-win. Sounds like a good deal to me. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate this conversation. Thank you for taking the time. And I feel like I learned a lot. And I think anybody who's listening or watching, unless you happen to be some kind of connoisseur on Gunnar already, I think there's probably something in here that you learned. And, I think different ways that we can not only benefit our patients, but our practices, the industry in general, which is always the goal of the podcast. So thank you again, Joe.
Hey, thank you, Arthur. Appreciate it.
And thank you to everybody who's listening and watching the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. We'll see you guys in the next episode.